have, so I'm just going to flip the script.
And it was my first event, like ever. So
Ever.
Catherine was my first moderator for when we were talking about Snowfall Fox. It was very cool. Well, let's set the scene. Why don't we start by you telling us all about seen her, but obviously please keep it spoiler free.
So the person who did it was it's about a woman named Cassie Peters who is leaving her life in New York to return to the Mammoth Yosemite area to join the search and rescue squad in Yosemite. And soon after she does, a couple goes missing in Yosemite and she gets involved in trying to find them. And there's echoes of another disappearance 10 years earlier.
What initially inspired you to set this in Yosemite? Because I think this was such an intriguing setting, and setting is such a, I don't know, I think a really particular way to set a thriller apart. So I just want to know what brought you to Yosemite and the research you did that was involved in that part of the process.
Yeah, so my sister and brother-in-law worked search and rescue in Yosemite for 5 years, 15 years ago, and I had been staying with them sort of pandemic-related time, maybe not the height of pandemic, and because they had been living in Vegas, and they moved to Mammoth, California. It's like two polar opposite places to live. They moved back there during the pandemic, and so it just kind of revived, like, oh, tell me all these stories. What you say? I had never been to Yosemite, so I went for the first time, and they were telling me all these like insane stories of all these rescues they were on, and just all the little details. And so I was already thinking about setting something there, maybe a TV show. And then Gabby Petito went missing in Jackson Hole, which is another place that I've spent a lot of time in Grand Teton National Park. And so that just, I think because I've already been thinking about setting something in that setting, so even before we knew what happened to her, it's definitely not her story.
Right.
I think it just, sometimes as an author, you're thinking of something and something happens and it sort of sparks.
It tells you like, oh, this is the story.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Now you mentioned the search and rescue, but I'd like to hear a lot more about that.
Okay.
Because I feel like your book just went into so much detail about it to the point where I was like, did you do that at some point? It sounds like you did it, but
I did not do that. Yeah.
But just want to hear more about like the process in terms of like making sure you nailed those details.
Right. Really. My brother-in-law, I was just up there. My brother-in-law was reading the book for the first time, and he was like, "So on this page, when you said this is wrong."
Oh,
and
good.
I'm like,
That's all.
Thanks, Scott. I didn't think to ask that question. It was a lot of just asking them details. My sister used to read everything I wrote, and she was moving out of doing that as I was writing this book. So she read like the first 50 pages and helped with some orientation. I was actually lived in Maryland for a month when I was writing the book.
Oh, you did?
So that helped because I was really in situ.
Yeah.
And then I watched tons and tons and tons of rock climbing movies. So Free Solo and The Dawn Wall and The Alpinist and 10 others that nobody's ever heard of. So I was really sort of immerse myself in that culture to try to get the details right.
Have you done any rock climbing?
I have rock climbed a little, but I am bad.
Okay.
I'm scared of heights.
It sounds very scary to me.
Yes, so my sister and brother-in-law are rock climbers, and they are very good at it. And yeah, it's not my forte. Can't be good at everything.
You have some different timelines going on in this novel, and as someone who works within that structure as well, I'd love to hear how you go about organizing them, keeping all the details straight, especially where twists and turns are concerned, because it is not the easiest thing to do. So I'd just love to hear more about your process of working with multiple timelines.
I do a different, or a thing where I write in Word and then I import into Scrivener, which is this writing software.
Oh yeah, I'm familiar.
And what Scrivener allows you to do is to have kind of a left-hand column where each chapter or even each scene is color-coded. And so in particular, when I'm writing a timeline book, or even just trying to decide like how much backstory should I put, I have this color-coded system that helps do that. I think also, because I've written so many novels, which I know is one of your questions, but I just sort of developed an ability to keep those different things in my head over time. I did write a book that had 7 narrators.
Wow.
Which seems insane when I say it out loud, but I think I pulled it off. So Yeah, I go back and forth. Sometimes I just have one, and here I wanted to have a sort of dual narrative, and then to also, you know, using that sort of flash forward, flashback does help create tension.
Yeah.
Because you know something bad's about to happen.
Right.
So when we meet Cassie in the first chapter, she is airlifted out of the field, and there's a body in a bottom bag. So somebody's gonna die. I mean, it's a thriller, so you probably knew that already.
Yeah. 7 narrators in another. So I want to talk about that too, because I noticed what you did with this novel, because you have the social media elements,
Right.
the journal entries, and then Cassie's POV, which I think was a really cool way to orient the reader as to where we are at any given moment and who we're with.
Yeah.
When you did the 7 narrators, did everyone have, like, did you do any of those, like, kind of separate things? Like, how do you differentiate the voices?
Yeah,
'Cause I noticed that's how you did it here.
Yeah,
Was that always the plan?
Super question. So
Yeah.
for the 7 narrators, 6 of them were in third person.
Okay.
And then there was one who was in first person who was narrating like the night in question that had happened 10 years before, or 20 years before. It's a book called I'll Never Tell. But for this, again, I think partly inspired by Gabby because, you know, she had these Instagram posts, and I think people kind of make a mistake because they say that she was like this Instagram influencer, but it's not. Like, she had, I don't know, 1,500 followers or something before she went missing, and then it exploded. But a super interesting part of her story also was sort of the amateur sleuths on TikTok and YouTube, and I incorporated a bit of that into the story as well. So I think because of that piece of it, I was like, so interesting to try and meet a character we only know through social media. And so Jada, one of the women, so there are 3 narrators in the book, and Jada, we meet her at first only through her Instagram posts, and we never get her point of view. We just meet her later in the book when Cassie finally meets her in person. And there is, I don't know if anyone other than my editors have picked up on this, but there is a difference between, now that I've said it, if you read the book, maybe you'll notice, but there's a difference between her Instagram and her in person, which is deliberate,
True to life,
which is also true to life, right? I think we've all had people that like know us online and then meet us in real life, and you're nothing like you are, or whatever. And I'm like, yes, that's true. Good or bad, I don't know. But yeah, and then the other narration is through diary entries, which I also think is super interesting. And I had a lot of fun writing the diary entries because, like, I've always wondered, because as someone who has never kept a diary other than like briefly for 10 minutes when I was 14, it's like, who are diaries for? You know? And I always find it interesting, like, are you writing to yourself? Are you hoping someone's going to read it someday? Like, I'm always interested in that sort of perspective. I felt so self-conscious when even at 14, everything is self-conscious. I felt like uber self-conscious. Like, who is diary? If you're writing Dear Diary, like, who are you writing to?
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I'd be mortified if anyone ever wrote my journal. So definitely not writing them for others' eyes.
Right. But then, but for as a writing exercise, or
It depends on the stage of life. I'm not currently journaling,
Okay.
but I did a lot in high school. I think I just had like a lot going on in my head. We need to get it out. And then so it's fun for me to read back, even though sometimes it is cringy, but it is totally personal.
Right. And so I played with that in it because she is doing it as a writing exercise, but she is revealing also herself in a certain way without spoiling anything in the diary. So it was fun to play with kind of multimedia. And then the like woo-woo part of it all is that, you know, when we write books, we're writing in 2 dimensions, right? But we make a 4-dimensional, 5-dimensional world. We make the real world out of just somebody like reading something. So you have to create sight, sound, smells, all that stuff. And I thought it would be interesting, particularly with the Instagram post, to use a visual medium that normally goes a picture and then the caption is sort of secondary. But here there's no pictures.
Right.
There's just a description.
Did you consider a picture?
I mean, in my draft, I had in brackets what the picture was. You should not make it into the book. I'm just realizing I feel today. I just don't think it ever really came up.
Yeah,
that was. Yeah. But I did have descriptions. How did this happen without discussion? Interesting. Maybe for the paperback. Anyway, so yeah. So we never had a conversation about it. I think when I just got the typeset back, I was like, that's fine.
Yeah.
Because I kind of knew there were going to be pictures.
Sure.
So I wanted to, it was like a writing exercise, like a journal, to do it without the pictures, but still convey that you were reading an Instagram post.
Sure. This is a good lead into my next question because we're talking about the girls now, and you have like 3 really well-drawn female characters at the center.
Right.
So we have Cassie, we have Petal, and we have Jada.
Mhm.
So can you introduce us to them almost as if they were at like a party with us? Like, feel free to be in a gossipy way if
All right.
you want. Like, what would you say about Cassie? Julie Clark asked me this at my event.
Oh, that's a good-
it was
good
such
question.
a good way
It's a
to
good
ask
question.
question.
Cassie is somebody who like doesn't think very far ahead. Like she just kind of does stuff without thinking about the consequences. And it's kind of her own worst enemy, I think, a lot of the time. She's very closed off and not good at letting her guard down and getting close to people, which makes sense if you read the book. But, and then Jada is sort of carefree and young and idealistic and adventurous and wants to see the world and sort of plunges headlong into projects. She's very into like animal rights activism, but she also doesn't think of the consequences, but in a different way. And then Petal was super fun to write because she's one of those characters who does not give a F what anybody thinks about her. And she'll just like tell you to your face what she thinks about you. And it's fun as a writer to write like that, right? Because you can't go through life actually being like that.
Right. Well, you can't.
I mean, you can,
not
but you should probably not do that. So, yeah, that's who she is, and she is in a relationship with a much older woman, and sort of ran away from her life. But her mom also ran away and left her behind, and so she's kind of aping her mom's behavior.
Okay, so as a newer novelist,
Yeah,
and you're someone that's written many novels.
too many
14?
novels. 15.
15 novels?
Too many novels.
That's
Too
a
many
lot.
novels.
I'd love to hear, because I'm sure each one is a different experience.
Sure.
And I'd love to hear any lessons you took from writing this book into your next one, or anything from your experience of writing your previous novels that you always take with you moving forward. And yes, I'm asking for
you.
advice.
This is for you. Asking for a friend who is you. I think the biggest thing, honestly, which I took from the first book that I wrote that was never published, that will never be published, that I want to say lives in a drawer, but it's not true. It lives in like a computer. No, it doesn't. I don't have a digital copy of it. I have one physical copy. It's so long ago that I don't even have that computer anymore, and I never saved it. But I have one physical copy of the book. It's just like once you finish a novel, you know you could do it again, right? And I think because every novel feels horrible, every novel starts with this blank page where you're like, okay, 90,000 words, let's go, you know? And then I don't know about you, but for me, the beginning is always the fun, easy part, and then 30,000, 60,000 is hell. And I just crossed the 30,000 word mark on like my next novel today. And I'm like, oh boy, here we go.
Right.
And then I'm looking at like my outline, which is literally words like tennis, morning. I'm like, wow, this is super helpful. I guess the chapter is going to be in the morning.
I know.
What is
Something
it?
I aspire to do with my next book is be a better outliner.
And then I literally clicked on it and I was like, oh, some of these have words, which is good. Others, 0 words.
Yeah.
Like, thank you, past Catherine, for helping future Catherine. And then the end, I always find easier because you're just wrapping everything up. So I think number one is like, you've done it before, so you can do it again. I think it's important to challenge yourself with each book, to actually not just do what you did the last time, but to find something in the book that is different, even if it's only different for you. So is it like to try to do 7 narrators or, you know, whatever it is. But like I could say in each one of my books what the challenge that I put to myself was when I started out. And then always my main advice is just write the story that won't be you. Because, as you know, you spend a long time writing a book.
Certainly do.
And editing a book and reading it over and over again. And so if you don't love the story, then that's really sucks.
That's good advice. I definitely challenged myself with my second novel. You can ask my husband. There's a lot of crying around the house this summer.
Why did I do this?
What was your favorite scene to write that isn't a spoiler, if you can manage?
I think that there's an early scene in the book where Cassie's just arrived outside of Mammoth, and she's in a famous place called the Low Nelly Deli, which is actually like in a mobile, and which I can't spell properly. No. And they run into this like couple from LA who's like up with skiing, and I just like the voice of, and she meets Head Over for the first time, and I just like the like snarkiness, but also the observe. It was fun to write that.
Yeah.
See sort of cultures clash. Somebody's got like a stupid hat from Texas or something, and it's like not being a nice person towards the gay couple. And like I just think it's like there's like 3 or 4 different cultures all clash in this one real place that has good margaritas, and so it was just it was fun to bring that to life. Yeah.
And then on the flip side, what was a scene that was really challenging to write, where you had to maybe tackle it a few times before it felt right?
Yeah, I really think I think it's got to be some stuff in the middle. It's hard to say without spoiling.
Right.
What I would say is that so normally I always know the end of my books. Like not necessarily the scene, but the resolution, how it's going to end. And when I turned in the first draft of this book, I was kind of tired, and I maybe filmed it in a little bit, and it had a much happier ending than it does now. And my editors were. I also published a rom-com this year, and my editors were like, I think you got a little confused between your rom-coms and your thrillers. Like, couples should not be going off into the sunset in Malibu. And I was like, okay, you're right. So I had to go back to the drawing board.
Now that you've written, because
Yeah.
this one's your first rom-com, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you find yourself going more in that direction, or you think you'll always do both, or is your rom-com like one and done, no thanks, I'm a thriller girl?
I have a second rom-com coming up.
Okay, great.
Next year, May 7th. It's called Koller Croft. It's a big question. They're just very different.
Sure.
Like when you're writing thrillers, you're living in a dark place, right? Like bad things happen. Not a lot of laughs. Sometimes there's laughs, but not a lot of laughs. And then my first draft of conversely, after I sold my rom-com, my editor was like, there is too much plot in this book. It reads like one of your thrillers, but a romance, like it's 2-page journey. So you're just exploring different things, but it is easier. I find I can write more words in a day in a rom-com than I can in a thriller. That makes sense. Because there's less plot involved and more emotions. And then I have a project that's like was announced, but it's now a secret. So we're just not going to talk about the name of it. But my next project I think is marrying the two, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I love a genre mashup.
Yeah.
I was gonna say my thrillers are creepy, but also I try to make them funny too.
Yeah,
I feel like
it is funny. It is for sure.
So
and
I
very
like the
very voicey too, which is good. Yeah. So and that's what's been fun about this other project is being able to have that like super voiciness and laughs, but also tell a good mystery. Do both together. So I'm trying to like make my life easier.
Yeah.
And meld the two friends. Yeah.
Okay, so once again, this author, Liv Stratman, asked me this at one of my events, and I thought it was the most fun question, so I like to end my Q&As with it. What do you think are the best, accoutrement for someone that's about to sit down with Have You Seen Her? So I have 4 things I want to ask. It's like the starter pack to get you in the mood to read the book. So a TV show or movie?
Any of those movies that I mentioned. So if you haven't watched Free Solo, I have sympathetic vertigo. So I literally feel like sick to my stomach watching people even fake high wire and things. Remember that movie about the guy going between the Twin Towers?
Yes.
So that's a movie. I know he survives, and I'm still stressed. But yeah, it's super stressful. But anyway, Free Solo is a great movie, and everyone's talked about that movie. But there is this movie called The Alpinist about a Canadian. I am Canadian. About a Canadian alpinist. That's on, I want to say Netflix, or maybe Disney. Anyway, it's really great. It's a great movie. It will put you in the spirit. In the spirit.
What about a song?
Oh my god. It's a harder one. I want to say Indigo Girls, road movie closer
Great,
to time.
perfect.
I feel like I'm cribbing from Barbie, you know.
Cheers.
Yeah.
I don't like the Indigo Girls. An item of clothing.
I mean, hiking boots.
Yes.
Yeah, those aren't something that you put on just to like loll around in the house.
Right.
Right. But it's been fun seeing some people, on Instagram post stage.
Yes.
So people definitely staged with their hiking boots. Somebody did take the book to Yosemite, which
Oh,
I was so
cool.
excited
That
about.
is
I was
exciting.
like, yay! Yeah, and then I just like took some pictures around them with the book because I was just out there.
Oh, that's great.
So yeah, that was fun. Yeah, so
And-
hiking boots.
And then a drink or snack.
I mean a beer.
Perfect.
A beer is for after hiking.
Beer, hiking boots,
Right?
Indigo Girls.
Indigo Girls.
Sounds like a great night.
Yeah, Rosie.
Well, let's open it up to audience questions for Catherine. Anyone has one?
You look like you do have a question. Sure.
What's your day-to-day writing process like? Do you get up at the same time, write at the same time, end at the same time?
Yeah, I try to write in the morning, like do a session in the morning. That is my big thinking time, my more productive time. So try to be, I guess, by like 8, but other things interfere, like tennis or I'll do like 2 or 3 hours, and then I'll take a break, and then I'll switch projects in the afternoon. Very rare that I can write morning and afternoon in the same projects. I have a certain amount of creative energy for any project.
But you in theory could work on a rom-com in the morning and your thriller in the afternoon.
Yeah, not
and
in theory.
feel
I have done that
you've done
many times. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I was a lawyer for a long time. When I stopped practicing, I kind of took that model because I used to only write it on the weekends, sometimes at night, but then I was tired and old. But or old and tired, I don't know which one. But so when I started writing full time, I was like, oh, okay, every day I need to write now, which was an adjustment. And so I took that sort of knowledge about myself from law, and I do like the harder work in the morning, the easier, sure, whatever it is. So, or maybe I'm working on a screenwriting project in the afternoon or something like that. Not this writing screenwriting. It's easy, but it's just different energy. You know?
It is different.
Yeah. We must
Agree with that.
Yeah. Rich?
First of all, you're a wonderful moderator because all of the questions I would have asked her, you already
Oh, thank you.
This is actually for both of you. It's the generic, AI question, which is how, with ChatGPT and out there, is it any? Have you ever have you ever asked ChatGPT, how would Catherine write this scene? Or,
Right.
I mean, and
I have
how?
not done that. I know someone who did. Someone like, I don't know, that almost feels like hubristic. Like, how would it even know who I am? I guess maybe it does, but I know someone like a bigger name than me who did that and then posted the chat or the paragraph and was like, this is eerie. Because it is like how it was.
Was it good?
It was okay.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I have lots of thoughts about AI, as you know, Rich, but I have not done that. And I have not figured out how to make it work for me. I do think, and I'm not a normally suspicious person, but I feel like you put out the free thing that's not as good as the real thing to like test boundaries and get people's reactions and also get a bunch of people to use your software for free to figure out all the glitches and make it better. And I don't know that I want to participate in that process.
It creeps me out. And
yeah.
I'm generally not an early adopter. Like I will play with that stuff when I have to, but I'm not that. It just kind of creeps me out personally. But I know it's coming for us. It's coming for everybody.
I mean, I went to a talk about AI this week, given by an academic, who I thought was very naive. But what I came away with was like, what the WGA and others are for right now is like, the only thing that's going to protect us is contractual protections. Because that's the only thing. And then I was having lunch with somebody at breakfast the other day, and she was talking to an IP lawyer who's like an advanced AI IP lawyer. And that person was like, 10 years, your job will be obsolete. And I was like, I feel like I've heard that many times before because of Kindle books or whatever. We keep being told that the book business is dying. It doesn't die.
Right.
So, and I don't think that you can replace the creativity of authors.
No, I don't either. And then there's something like, why do we want the robots writing stuff? Who are they writing this for?
Right.
Like, other robots. It just like the whole thing is like so bizarre.
Well, yeah, and somebody else
I
was
don't
saying to me, like, well, what about, it will just mean they could churn out more, but I'm like, we don't need more books. Like, publishers don't want more books. They probably should be publishing less. So we don't need that automation speed.
Yeah,
And neither does Hollywood,
to what
right?
end?
Like, there's an endless supply of
Yeah.
scripts and so that's not the problem. Supply is not the problem.
Right.
You know? So I feel like the things that AI and technology in general can help in other industries to reduce costs and make things easier and better and all that stuff doesn't necessarily apply in the business. Maybe I might, but
Good question.
you'll just retire before you
Or die.
Or die. One or the other. Yeah.
You talked about outlining and how vague some of it wound up being, or at least when you went.
Yeah.
Well, how detail oriented do you like to get in an outline before you commit to a scene?
Oh no, I don't outline.
Oh, you don't?
I really don't. I mean, I know the who, what, where, when, why of a book before I start writing it. And so, because, you can think of a premise for something, but where does that go? And so many premises don't go anywhere, or they don't go anywhere right now. I've had ideas for books that I had a part of the idea 10 years ago, and then a second part of the idea 8 years ago, and then the last piece came in 6 years ago, and I put all those pieces together. But so I know how it's going to end. I know who did it, why they did it, how they did it, when they're going to do it. I think about some of the big twists that need to happen sort of structurally. And then I just spend the most time writing the first third of the book. And I think about the main character before I start writing. Who is going to tell the story, or what multiple people are going to tell this story. And then normally the voice of the main character shows up in the form of like a first line of the book. And so that's all the weird part of being a writer, right? It's like you're channeling some other person that lives in your head that doesn't exist. And then I spend the first third of the book working out who that person is, who the other people in the book are, what the structure is going to be. And then I kind of outline as I go along. But I've rarely had a real actual outline for something. I have had it, oddly, for my 2 rom-coms for completely different reasons. It does make your life easier, where it's like, what am I going to write next? Oh, look, I already told myself what to write. Every time I've done one, and then it's been useful, I'm like, I should do this again, and yet I cannot make myself do it. So I've only ever done it when I had to do it to sell something.
Yeah.
That's the only time.
I feel like my brain works differently when I'm drafting or I'm outlining. And sometimes I will outline, but as I'm writing, I'm like, oh, I don't actually want to do that because this is more interesting to me. And then it totally defeats the purpose of the outline. It's just done. So I don't know. I'm kind of a hybrid. It depends.
Yeah, I think you have to leave room, if you are an outliner, leave room open
Yeah.
for, and I also write my scenes and drafts. So my first draft comes out mostly dialogue, which makes going to screenwriting very easy because that's just how my brain works. And then I fill in the prose and where are they and what does everyone look like and all that stuff. In a second or third draft of the scene. But one trick I use, and I say this, but I have not used it for my work in progress. So my book that's a secret, I sold. I wrote half of it and then I sold it on proposal, but I had to have an outline. My agent was like, there needs to be an outline here, Catherine, before I take this out. And I was like, but I can't outline. Why do you keep asking me to do this? And then I had a brainwave. This is a very voicey book. I wrote the rest of the outline in the voice of the main character.
Oh, good.
And it totally opened it up. And it was way, way easier to do it.
Yeah.
And as I'm saying this out loud, I know I should spend the next week doing that on my work in progress.
It's a good reminder for yourself.
Use those words like window and chair and turn them into, it is actually a good reminder for myself. So I found that helped.
Yeah.
But it's, and particularly mysteries and thrillers, I don't know why. I think part of it is, and maybe you could feel this too. It's like sometimes if you put those things in outline, it just feels so stupid. It's like, well, and then this thing happened, and then this other dumb thing happened, and then they were stupid, and they didn't go there, but they did go down the stairs. Who goes into the basement? Idiots, you know? And it just sounds dumb. Whereas when
Because
you
reading an outline is boring.
It is
It's just
boring.
is not that exciting. Whereas like then I read the scene that I constructed from the outline, I'm like, oh, thank God, because this
Right.
looked like it sucked.
But you also have you have the opportunity to make it come to life in a way that's plausible in the world of the book so that
Yeah.
people can follow along and it's not just a series of stupid events, which
Right.
is basically what thrillers and mysteries are, right? A series of stupid events by Catherine coming for you in 2026.
I find it so interesting that settings are usually, they play such a pivotal role in all of your novels, and they're usually as important as any of the characters.
Right.
At what point does the setting usually formulate for you in the process? Is it early on? Is it later?
Yeah, no, it's definitely early. So part of that initial, I mean, sometimes the premise is the setting. So like with Have You Seen Her? It's like this is going to be set in Yosemite. That's where it's going to be set. And so that shaped that beginning process. Other times, like I wrote a book called The Good Liar that's about three women all touched by the same national tragedy when a building explodes.
So they must have been very close.
Well, that explodes, and it's a national tragedy. I couldn't set that in New York.
Right.
So then it was like, okay, where's not New York that is, like where can I do it that's not New York, but that can feel it. So that book is set in Chicago. So, but I worked that stuff out before I started writing. And I think sometimes, like for sure in Have You Seen Her, my book on the Hotel, which is set in the summer camp, like the setting is a character in the book for sure. Other times I would say less. I mean, interestingly, my first 3 novels were all in an unnamed place. It was a city in North America that was never named. And then my 4th novel, I made up a town called Springfield because every state is Springfield. Actually, there was 2 Springfields in that book, and I really only set a book in a real place for the first time with my novel Smoke, which was Jackson Hole, but I named it something else. And so I feel like that's been something that I've evolved into over time. Hence, I was supposed to go to Catalina Island during the hurricane to do research for my book that I'm writing right now, and obviously I did not go because it said hurricane. Of course, the book is set there during a hurricane.
Oh, so weird.
So I'm actually on the fence about, do I go later? Or do I just never go? And then that's part of the marketing of the book. Like, I never went to Catalina because of the hurricane. I don't know. I gotta think about that one.
Oh.
The book is also very meta. So it's kind of weird and hilarious that from once to a century hurricane.
Yeah, no kidding. It wrote it into existence.
Yeah, nobody died, right? So I didn't write something that that bad. There's a lot of property.
Right.
They did evacuate.
They did.
Which it's kind of a good thing it happened because I was like, I hadn't even considered that that's what should happen on an island, that nobody should actually be there if the storm's coming. So I've had to adjust my story a little bit.
Yeah.
Thank you, universe.
So also for both of you, do you ever find it instructive to go back and visit your past work?
I just have the one book so far, but my second one's coming out next summer. And I have revisited Stone Cold Fox in writing my second one. It's still a thriller, but it's definitely different. But in terms of like motivation for character, I often revisit B because she's still like singularly focused on getting what she wants. And I have a character in my new book who is still like conniving, but I don't want her to be exactly like B, and she's different. But there are moments where I'm like, oh, she really needs like a swift kick in the ass here, and I'll like revisit my book to see if I can
I'm going
get
to add on to that though, because
This is
do you
my
revisit?
husband.
Yeah.
Or a stalker?
But do you-
Amendment.
Yeah. But to that end, do you go back and look at your screenplays, or do you go back and look at things you've written where people have commented on, where you have similar themes and take those into the books? Or
I
do you
actually
just
haven't revisited my scripts for my for novel purposes. That's not to say I wouldn't ever do it, but specifically in writing my second book, I do find myself flipping back to scenes that I love that, and also just because I love my book so much, and it's been hard. I've had a harder time with my second book, so sometimes I just read and be like, "Oh, you can actually do
You
this!"
can do this.
Like just to kind of give me the little motivation that I need to keep going. So, what about you?
I have sometimes read things, never for the reason that you've done it. I fall into two categories. A couple of times I'm maybe going to be adapting something, so then I had to read it. And depending how far I go back, sometimes it's like reading to strangers. Literally the other day, you know how Facebook like puts videos up? And it was a scene from The Good Liar that came out in 2016, which means I wrote it in 2015. And I was like, was that her name? Because like the name Kate was at the beginning of the chapter, and I was like, who is that? Really? Oh. And to open a parenthesis, I think I have 4 different books with the characters named Kate in it, but whatever. So that was weird, right?
Yeah.
It's like sometimes it becomes like, have you ever picked up a college essay, you know, where you're like, oh, I was smart in college, you know? So yeah, sometimes it's very disconnected, but at the same time, and I've sometimes had to reread because my book for translation purposes was only into French because I speak French. And then they'll be asking me questions like, is this what you meant? And then I have to go back and read, you know, oh, is it? I'm not sure. You know? So yeah, it's weird. I mean, I've described writing books as a process of breaking down joy. Because, right? Like if you wrote the end, and then the next thing that happened is this beautiful hardcover showed up. That's not how it works, right? So it's like, yeah, you wrote the end, and then you edited it a million times, and then you get a long letter from your editor telling you why it sucks. They don't use that word, but that is what they mean. And you have to rewrite it, and then copy edits and proofreading. The cover is no good, or it's, you know, blah, blah, blah. And then when you finally get to the final book, like, I'm glad you still love that book. And I feel that way about my first book, but I have to say some of the others, I'm like, if I never read that, and again, I'm not with that. Because there are no surprises. I wrote the thing.
Right.
You never turn the page and you're like, what a twist, didn't see that coming. You know, like, or what a well-turned phrase. Like, occasionally I make myself laugh. But I take myself as practice every once in a while. But so I haven't ever done it for that reason. But I don't know, it feels like it's like musicians listening to their own songs. Like it's like putting on your own album. Like they probably do that though, right? Like,
I would.
Right? I know, but like, yeah. But I guess you'll see you move on from. It's always harder with the first book, but you
Sure.
do move on from that book.
Oh, of course.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's not like a kid that like stays with you in the house till they're 35.
Yeah.
Like you do put it down.
Yeah.
You know, you can be proud of them, right? So, sorry. Yeah. So no, I haven't done it, but when I have encountered my previous self, like, yeah, I'm usually happy with what I've seen. I'm not, you know, some people are like, oh my God, I would totally rewrite this whole scene now. I don't feel like that. But
No, when something's done for me, it's done.
I agree. I'm like that too. Yeah. And I'm
Because
happy
you could
about that.
rewrite something forever, and I don't want to do that. You make a decision, and this is how it goes.
You know those famous stories about like people losing novels? Right? Like Hemingway lost a novel, but then he rewrote it. I just never would have forget it. I would never do it. No way. I know somebody who turned in a book. Their editor didn't like it. They loved the concept, but not that execution. She started back from page 1 and I'm like, absolutely not. Next, like 0, no way. Couldn't do it.
Yeah.
No. Nope. It's just not me. I you know, people who spend like 4 or 5 years writing something, like for me, the difference in how much better it would be is so infinitesimal, but this is not worth it.
Yeah.
It's not worth it. But.
Anyone else?
Does Rosie have a question? What was she trying to say?
She was trying to say a lot, so Brett took
Well, thank you, Catherine.
Thank
This
you.
was so awesome,
Thank
and
you for
congratulations
coming.
on
Thank you.
another stunning success.
Thank you.